What's the hardest part of being an identical twin? My parents were obsessed with me, and my twin Connie being identical down to the smallest detail. They had this whole philosophy that identical twins were nature's perfect creation, and that any difference between us was a flaw that needed correcting. Even our names were practically the same, Connie and Bonnie. Every single morning started the same way. We'd stand in the bathroom while Mom measured everything. Hair length with a ruler down to the millimeter. Weight on a scale that went to the decimal point. Height against the wall with marks in pencil. She'd measure our waists, our arms, our legs, even the width of our faces with this weird caliper thing. If anything was off by even the tiniest amount, she'd freak out. One time Connie weighed 0.3 pounds more than me after dinner, and Mom made her run on the treadmill for an hour, while I had to eat spoonfuls of peanut butter to catch up. We had to wear the exact same clothes every single day. Same underwear, same socks, same shoes, even though Connie's feet were slightly bigger and her toes were always pinched. We had the same haircut measured with a ruler every week. We weren't allowed to have different interests or hobbies because that might make us develop differently. We both had to take piano even though I was terrible at it and Connie was actually good. We both had to play soccer even though Connie hated running, so that my calves wouldn't look different. The crazy thing was that Connie and I actually got along really well. Deep down we were so different, with practically opposite personalities, but we were still best friends. We worked hard to stay identical so that we wouldn't make life harder for the other one, even though we both really wanted to be our own person. We always talked about how we'd escape once we turned 18, and I'd dye my hair pink, and Connie would never put on a running shoe again. When we hit puberty, things got even worse. We developed at slightly different rates, and Mom would stuff my bras to match Connie and wrap Connie's chest when she got bigger than me. Our faces started changing in tiny ways. Connie's nose got slightly wider and mine stayed narrow. One night, Mom came into our room with pamphlets from plastic surgeons and said we'd both be getting nose jobs when we turned 16 to make sure we stayed identical. She showed us before and after photos like she was planning a vacation. That was when Connie looked at me, and I could see she'd hit her limit. We started planning our escape that night. We had 2 years until the nose jobs, and we decided we weren't waiting around to let them carve up our faces. We started hiding money from birthday cards and Christmas. We researched bus routes to the nearest city where we had a cousin who'd always seemed normal. We were careful and patient, and we thought we were so smart. But then Mom found our escape fund. She didn't yell at first. She just made us sit at the kitchen table while she counted every single dollar and asked us what it was for. We tried to lie and say we were saving up for matching bikes, but she didn't believe us. Dad came home and they both just stared at us for like an hour without saying anything, which was somehow worse than screaming. They locked us in our room for a week. No school, no phone, barely any food. Connie cried herself to sleep every night thinking about them cutting into our faces. I started having panic attacks. We tried to come up with new escape plans, but they were watching us every second. They pulled us out of regular school completely and started homeschooling us so nobody could influence us. We had 4 months until the surgery date, and we felt completely trapped. Then 3 weeks ago, Connie was in the car with Dad going to the grocery store when someone ran a red light and hit the passenger side. I was at home with Mom when the hospital called. We got there, and they wouldn't let us see her for hours. When a doctor finally came out, he said she was stable, but her face had gone through the windshield. Broken jaw, shattered cheekbone, her nose was crushed. They were taking her into surgery. I couldn't breathe. This was Connie, my best friend, my other half. They operated on her 5 times over the next 2 weeks. When she finally came home, her face was completely different. The right side was covered in scars. Her jaw sat wrong. Her nose was a totally different shape. She didn't look like me anymore at all. That night, Mom and Dad called me into the kitchen alone while Connie was upstairs sleeping. Dad pulled out a folder full of medical documents and photos of Connie's injuries. He spread them across the table in front of me. Photos of her face right after the accident. Photos from each surgery. Detailed reports of every bone they'd broken and reset. I felt sick looking at them. Mom sat down next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "We've found a surgeon who can replicate Connie's injuries on you." My hands shake as I stare at the medical photos spread across the kitchen table. Each image shows Connie's face at different stages. The broken bones, the surgical repairs, the scars forming. Mom and Dad sit there watching me like this is a normal family discussion, like they're asking if I want pizza for dinner instead of proposing they surgically replicate my sister's car accident injuries on my face. I force myself to look at each photo even though my stomach is turning. There's Connie right after the accident with her face covered in blood. There's the x-ray showing her shattered cheekbone. There's a surgical report detailing every bone they broke and reset. I realize they're showing me a blueprint for what they want to do to me. My voice comes out flat and empty when I finally speak. "I need to think about this," I say, which buys me maybe one night before they expect my agreement. Dad closes the folder and Mom squeezes my shoulder like I've done something brave instead of horrifying. That night I wait until I hear Mom and Dad's bedroom door close and their TV turn on. I slip into Connie's room and she's awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I climb into bed next to her and we whisper so quietly I can barely hear her words around her wired jaw. "Not letting them," she slurs, and I squeeze her hand. We make a pact right there that we won't let this happen, that we'll find a way out even if we don't know what that looks like yet. Her hand is cold in mine and I can feel her shaking. She squeezes my hand 3 times, our old signal for, "I love you," and I squeeze back 4 times for, "I love you more." We're both crying silently, tears running down our faces in the dark. I stay there until she falls asleep, then creep back to my room before Mom does her midnight check. The next morning, I watch Connie struggle to eat yogurt through a straw at the kitchen table. Her face is still swollen and bruised, the right side covered in healing scars. She can barely move without help, and every little motion seems to hurt her. Mom stands nearby with Connie's pain medication, completely controlling when she gets relief. I realize Connie is trapped here in a way I'm not yet. She can't run, can't drive, can barely talk clearly enough to call for help. My stomach turns when I understand that any escape plan has to account for her medical needs and how limited her movement is. She catches my eye and I see the same understanding there. We can't just run away like we planned before the accident. Everything is different now. That afternoon, Mom takes Connie to physical therapy and Dad's at work. The house is empty for the first time in days. I dig through the recycling bin in the garage until I find the surgery pamphlet Mom threw away after last night's discussion. My hands are sweating as I smooth it out on the kitchen counter. I pull out my phone and take photos of every page, making sure the surgeon's name and contact info are clear. Then I open the voice recorder app and test it, speaking quietly to make sure it actually works and saves the file. My heart pounds the whole time. I keep glancing at the driveway, terrified I'll see Mom's car pulling in. I manage to hide the pamphlet back in the recycling and delete the test recording before I hear the garage door opening. I'm sitting at the table doing math homework when they come in, acting like nothing happened. At breakfast the next day, Mom launches into her philosophy speech again, but this time she's reframed the whole thing. She talks about twin studies and psychological bonds and how Connie's trauma is my trauma. She says we need to share this experience to stay connected, that it's not about looking identical anymore, but about emotional healing. Dad nods along and adds that insurance might even cover it as reconstructive surgery for psychological distress. He says they've been researching it and there's precedent for twins undergoing matching procedures for mental health reasons. I feel sick realizing they've been working on how to justify this, finding ways to make it sound medical instead of crazy. Mom reaches across the table and takes my hand. "This is about keeping you and Connie whole," she says, like breaking my face would somehow fix what's broken. I decide to test the boundaries that evening by asking what would happen if I said no. I try to make it sound hypothetical and curious rather than defiant. But theoretically, what if I didn't want to do it? I ask. Mom's face goes cold immediately. She sets down her fork and looks at me with this hard expression I've seen before. She says that's not really a choice because I'm a minor and they're my parents and they know what's best for our mental health. Dad adds that refusing would be abandoning Connie when she needs me most, that I'd be choosing my vanity over my sister's healing. I watch that small hope I'd been holding on to just shrivel up and die. They're not asking my permission. They never were. The next morning, I'm helping Connie with her medication schedule, reading the labels and organizing pills into her daily container. Mom's in the shower and I can hear the water running. Dad's still at work. I notice there's this 20-minute window every single day when Mom showers and Dad hasn't come home yet. It's not much, but it's something. A small crack in their constant surveillance. I file this information away carefully. I catch Connie's eye and see that she noticed too. The way I'm moving slower and being more deliberate. She gives me the tiniest nod. We don't say anything, but we both understand this might be our only chance to make phone calls or hide things or do anything without being watched. I remember that Mom's sister Audrey lives in the city about 2 hours away. We haven't seen her in years because Mom said she was a bad influence, that she didn't understand the twin bond and tried to treat us like separate people. I find an old address book in the junk drawer while I'm supposedly looking for stamps. My hands are sweating as I copy down Audrey's phone number and address into my phone. I have to be fast because Mom could come looking for me any second. The fact that Mom cut her off makes me think maybe Audrey would actually help us. Maybe she'd see how twisted this has gotten. I slip the address book back exactly where I found it and close the drawer quietly. That night, I'm lying in bed when I notice my phone screen light up even though I didn't touch it. I check the timestamp on my Instagram and see active 2 minutes ago, even though I haven't opened it in hours. I realize Mom and Dad have been checking my phone, my social media, even my email. Over the next hour, I watch the pattern, seeing when the last active timestamps change. They check everything at night after we go to bed and again in the morning before we used to leave for school. I start planning around their surveillance schedule in my head. I need to be smarter than just deleting things. I need to hide information where they won't think to look. Use the draft folder instead of sent messages. Maybe use apps they don't know about. The next morning during that medication window, I set my phone to record and leave it on the kitchen counter while I walk toward the bathroom. I call out that I need to use the bathroom and leave the phone sitting there like I forgot it. Through the bathroom door, I can hear Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen. I flush the toilet to make noise, wash my hands slowly. When I come back, I grab my phone casually and slip it into my pocket. Later, when Connie's napping, I listen to the recording with earbuds in. Mom's voice comes through clearly telling Dad that we need to schedule my surgery soon, that the longer we wait, the more Bonnie might resist. And that doctor, Yoon, seemed too ethical, so maybe we need to find someone else. My hands shake when I listen to it, but I've got proof now of what they're planning. I save the file 3 different ways and hide my phone under my mattress. That afternoon, I'm in the hallway when I hear this weird sound coming from the bathroom. I push the door open and find Connie standing in front of the mirror, just staring at her reflection. Her whole body is shaking and she's crying, these awful choking sobs that hurt to listen to. The right side of her face is still so swollen and the scars are dark red and angry looking. Her jaw sits wrong, like it doesn't quite fit anymore. She tries to talk through the wires holding her jaw together, and I can barely understand her, but I catch the words monster and sorry and ruined everything. I move next to her and put my arm around her shoulders, careful not to bump her face. I tell her she's beautiful and this isn't her fault. I say it over and over while she cries against my shoulder. But inside I'm so angry at Mom and Dad I can barely think straight. They've made her feel like this. Like her injuries are something to be ashamed of instead of something that happened to her. She pulls back and looks at me with tears running down her face. She whispers through her wired jaw that she doesn't want me to look like this too. She says she'd rather be different from have me hurt. I promise her it's going to be okay, even though I don't know if that's true. At dinner that night, Dad cuts up Connie's food into tiny pieces so she can kind of mash it and swallow it. Mom's watching us both like always, making sure we sit the same way and hold our forks the same way. Then Dad just casually mentions that he's made a consultation appointment for me with a plastic surgeon in 2 weeks. He says it like he's talking about a dentist appointment or something normal. My fork freezes halfway to my mouth and I feel Connie go completely rigid in the chair next to me. Mom smiles this weird bright smile and says, "Doctor Yoon specializes in facial reconstruction and comes highly recommended." She talks about his credentials and his success rate like she's reading from a brochure. I put my fork down because I can't eat anymore. The timeline just became real. 2 weeks. I have 2 weeks before they try to make this happen. Connie's hand finds mine under the table and squeezes hard. Neither of us finishes dinner. That night, after Mom and Dad finally go to bed, I dig through Dad's desk in the dark and find an old USB drive pushed to the back of a drawer. My hands are shaking. So bad I drop it twice before I can plug it into my laptop. I copy the audio file from my phone onto the drive, then I open my email. I draft a message to myself with the audio file attached, but I don't send it. I just save it as a draft where they might not think to look. Then I start a new draft addressed to Audrey's email that I found in that old address book. I type help in the subject line and attach the audio file. My heart's pounding so hard I can hear it in my ears. I save that as a draft too. The evidence exists in multiple places now. If they find one copy, maybe they won't find all of them. I hide the USB drive inside a book on my shelf and clear my browser history. Then I put my phone back under my mattress and try to sleep, but I just lie there staring at the ceiling. The next day is Connie's hospital follow-up appointment. We drive there in silence and I pay attention to everything. While Mom talks to the doctors about Connie's healing progress, I watch how the hospital works. I notice where the social worker's office is, down a hallway past the elevators. I see how the staff interact with each other and with patients. I note which areas have the most privacy and which have cameras. There's a suggestion box near the elevators, one of those metal boxes with a slot on top. I memorize exactly where it is. The discharge nurse is friendly and patient. The security guard by the main entrance looks bored. Everything seems normal, but I'm cataloging it all, building a map in my head of where I might find help if I need it. While Mom takes Connie down the hall for imaging tests, I tell them I need to use the bathroom. Mom nods and tells me to hurry. In the bathroom, I lock the stall door and pull out a piece of paper I folded up in my pocket. I wrote it this morning during that medication window. The words are simple and direct. I'm 15 years old and my parents want to do surgery on me that I don't want. They say I don't have a choice. Please help. My hands shake so bad I can barely fold the paper back up. I leave the bathroom and walk past the elevators like I'm heading back to the waiting room. Then I stop and look around. Nobody's watching. I slip the folded note through the slot in the suggestion box and keep walking. My heart's racing and my hands are sweating, but it's done. The note is in there. Someone will read it. Maybe nobody will care, or maybe they'll think it's a joke, but at least I tried. That evening back at home, Mom catches me looking at the hospital bulletin board too long. She asks what I was doing. I scramble for an answer and tell her I was reading about volunteer opportunities. It's a stupid lie, and her eyes narrow like she doesn't believe me. She doesn't say anything else, but I can tell she's suspicious. At dinner, Dad announces a new rule. I'm not allowed to wander off during Connie's appointments anymore. One of them has to be with me at all times. He says it like it's for our safety, but we all know what it really means. I spooked them by being too obvious at the hospital. They're tightening the surveillance. I look at Connie and see the same fear in her eyes that I'm feeling. We're running out of room to move. The next morning, during that 20-minute window when Mom's in the shower and Dad's not home yet, I move fast. I grab notebook paper and a pen and write everything down in a letter to Audrey. I explain about the surgery plan and the recordings and how we're trapped. I tell her we need help. I take the USB drive from its hiding spot and tape it to the bottom of the letter. Then I fold everything up and put it in an envelope. I write Audrey's address on the front and hide the whole thing in my backpack. That afternoon, Dad says we need to go to the post office to mail some bills. He tells me to come along to help Connie in and out of the car. At the post office, I hold the door for Connie while Dad's behind us carrying her out of the car. There's an outgoing mail slot right inside the door. I pull the letter from my backpack and drop it in the slot in one smooth motion. Dad doesn't see. We get back in the car and drive home, and I sit there thinking that letter is on its way to Audrey. She might not get it for days, but at least it's moving toward her. A few days later, I walk into the living room and find Mom doing what she calls identity maintenance on Connie. She's got her calipers out and she's measuring Connie's scars from every angle. She takes photos with her phone, close-ups of each scar and the way Connie's jaw sits now. She has a notebook where she's writing down which surgical procedures created which injuries. She's talking out loud about matching the scarring patterns exactly. I stand in the doorway watching this happen and something shifts inside me. It's not fear anymore. It's pure rage. This is so twisted and wrong, and she doesn't even see it. She thinks she's being scientific and careful. She thinks she's preserving something important. But she's planning to hurt me on purpose, and she's treating it like a craft project. I turn and walk away before she can see my face. I convince Dad I need to pick up a library book for homeschool. He's suspicious, but I show him the assignment I wrote myself, and he finally agrees to drive me. At the library, I head straight for the computers. I search for minor consent laws in our state. I read through legal websites and medical ethics pages. I learn that I can't actually be forced into elective surgery. Doctors need my assent for non-emergency procedures. Even though I'm 15, I have rights about what happens to my body. This knowledge feels like armor even though I don't know how to use it yet. I print out a few pages and fold them small enough to hide in my pocket. Then I clear the browser history carefully and check out a random book about World War II to make the trip look real. On the drive home, I sit in the back seat reading the book and thinking about consent and rights and how to make doctors listen to me. That night, Connie sits on her bed practicing talking around her wired jaw. She's so frustrated because she can barely make herself understood. Everything comes out slurred and muffled. She keeps trying the same words over and over, pushing sound through the wires and the swelling. Finally, she looks right at me and says as clearly as she can manage through her jaw, "You be mouth for both." I understand immediately what she means. She physically can't speak up for us right now. I need to be the one who talks. I need to be the voice for both of us since she can't use hers. I sit down next to her on the bed and take her hand. I promise her I will. I tell her I'll speak up and I won't let them do this to me. I'm terrified, and I don't know if I can actually keep that promise. But I say it anyway because she needs to hear it. We sit there in the dark holding hands, and I can feel how much she's counting on me. The next day, Dad sits me down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen. He's written out exactly what I should say to Dr. Yoon during the consultation next week. The words are all there in his neat handwriting, talking about how I want to share Connie's experience and maintain our twin bond, and how looking different from her is causing me psychological distress. He makes me read it out loud first, then again, then again. When I stumble over a word, he corrects me and makes me start from the beginning. We do this for over an hour until I can recite every line without pausing or messing up. My voice stays steady and clear even though inside I'm screaming at how wrong this all is. I perform the words perfectly, like I'm reading lines in a play about someone else's life. When Dad finally nods his approval, I glance toward the doorway and see Connie standing there watching. Her face is still swollen and bruised, but I can see tears running down her cheeks. She turns and walks away before Dad notices her. 3 days later, we're back at the hospital for Connie's regular checkup with the surgeon who did her reconstruction. Mom helps Connie out of the car and into the waiting room while I follow behind carrying Connie's medication bag. We check in at the desk and sit down in those uncomfortable plastic chairs. About 20 minutes into our wait, a woman in business casual clothes walks over with a clipboard. She introduces herself as Eloise Quigley and says she's a social worker who checks in with patients recovering from major facial trauma. Mom sits up straighter and puts on her helpful parent smile. Eloise asks Connie routine questions about pain levels and mobility and whether she's getting enough support at home. Connie nods and tries to answer through her wired jaw, but most of her words come out unclear. Mom jumps in to translate and explain how well we're all coping as a family. But I notice Eloise's eyes. They're sharp and focused as she looks between me and Connie and our parents. She asks if we're getting any counseling, and Mom says we're handling everything privately as a family. Eloise makes a note on her clipboard. I feel something shift in the air, like maybe this woman sees that something isn't right here, but I'm too scared to say anything with Mom sitting right there monitoring every word. When Eloise asks if there's anything else we need, I take a breath and force myself to speak up. I use the exact words from my lie at the last appointment and ask about volunteer opportunities at the hospital. Eloise pauses for just a second, then reaches into her folder and pulls out a pamphlet about the teen volunteer program. She hands it to me and says I can call her office anytime if I want to learn more. Mom looks pleased that I'm showing initiative. Later that evening back at home, I'm looking at the pamphlet more carefully, and I notice there's handwriting on the back. It's Eloise's direct office number written in blue pen. I stare at those digits and suddenly understand what just happened. We established a code. If I ask about volunteering, it means I'm not safe. She gave me a way to reach her directly. I hide the pamphlet inside my pillowcase with the other important papers. The next morning at breakfast, Mom announces that she's scheduled my consultation with Dr. Yoon for next week. She says it cheerfully, like she's telling us about a fun family outing. Dad nods and says the appointment is on Thursday afternoon. I watch Mom pull out a thick folder from the kitchen counter. She's printed out all of Connie's medical records and surgical reports. There are photos and procedure notes and billing statements all organized with colored tabs. She spreads them across the table, showing Dad how she's arranged everything chronologically. I realize they're moving faster now. Maybe they sensed my hesitation at the last hospital visit. Maybe they noticed me paying too much attention to the social worker. They're speeding up the timeline before I can build any more resistance. That night, I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I hear Mom and Dad talking in their bedroom next door. The walls are thin enough that I can make out most of what they're saying if I stay quiet. I grab my phone from my pocket and open the voice recorder app. Mom is coaching Dad on how to present everything to Dr. Yoon. She says we need to frame it as corrective symmetry for the twins' mental health rather than cosmetic matching. She tells Dad we should emphasize my psychological distress at looking different from Connie now. Make it sound like I'm the one asking for this procedure. Make it seem like I'm suffering from the separation. I hold my phone against the wall and let it record every word. My hands are shaking, but I keep the phone steady. They talk for almost 15 minutes about their strategy, and I capture all of it. When they finally stop talking, I save the file and hide my phone in my pocket. I feel sick at how planned out this is, how they're treating my face and my body like a project they need to manage correctly. The next afternoon, Connie has a complete breakdown. We're in our room and she's trying to do her physical therapy exercises when suddenly she just starts crying. The sobs make her jaw hurt worse, but she can't stop. She grabs my hand hard enough that her nails dig into my palm. Through her wired jaw, she makes me promise that I won't let them do this to me. She says I should run away if I have to. She says she'd rather look different from me forever than have me hurt on purpose. I promise her, even though I have no idea how I'll actually keep that promise. I realize the full weight of being her protector now when she's supposed to be my identical other half. We're supposed to be equal, but right now she's trapped by her injuries and her dependence on Mom for medication and wound care. I'm the one who still has mobility and options. Over the next few days, I start photographing everything I can in secret. I take pictures of the surgery pamphlets when Mom leaves them on the counter. I photograph the folder of Connie's medical records when it's sitting on the kitchen table. I take pictures of Mom doing her daily measurements of our faces and bodies with her calipers and rulers. I photograph the lock Dad installed on our bedroom door, the kind that only opens from the outside. Each photo feels like building a case, even though I don't know who I'm building it for yet. I just know I need proof of what's happening here. One morning, I wake up to find that Dad has installed that new lock on our bedroom door. I didn't hear him do it during the night, but there it is. A keyed deadbolt that only works from the hallway side. He says it's for our safety, to make sure we don't wander around the house when we should be sleeping. But we both know it's about control. That night, after they think we're asleep, I get up and test the door as quietly as I can. I turn the handle slowly and push. Nothing. We're literally locked in. The panic that hits me is different now. Sharper and more urgent than before. 2 days later, we're back at the hospital for another checkup. The discharge nurse hands Connie her paperwork in a folder, and I flip through it while Mom is talking to the receptionist about scheduling. Tucked inside between the appointment summary and the medication list is Eloise's business card. On the back are local crisis numbers and a domestic violence hotline. It's subtle enough that Mom doesn't notice when she takes the folder from me and puts it in her purse. Later when we get home, I memorize every number on that card before hiding it inside my pillowcase with everything else. That evening after dinner, I lie in bed and practice calling the minor rights hotline in my head. I rehearse what I would say and how I would explain our situation. I memorize the domestic violence number too, even though I'm not totally sure if this counts as violence when there's no hitting involved. I repeat the numbers over and over until they're burned into my brain, a lifeline I can access even without my phone since Dad took it away. I go through the script in my mind, imagining the conversation, preparing myself for when I might actually need to make that call for real. The next morning, I wake up to Mom sitting on the edge of my bed with a stack of old photo albums in her lap. She's smiling this soft, sad smile and patting the space next to her like I'm 5 years old again. I sit up slowly, and she opens the first album. Pages of me and Connie as babies dressed in identical pink outfits. Mom starts pointing at each photo and talking about how perfect we were together, how people would stop her on the street to admire her beautiful, identical twins. She turns page after page, showing us at every age, always matching, always together, and her voice gets this dreamy quality like she's talking about something precious that's slipping away. Dad appears in the doorway holding a shopping bag and pulls out 2 sets of matching pajamas, soft pink ones with little stars on them, the kind we wore when we were maybe 8. Mom's eyes fill with tears, and she says we're still her beautiful, identical daughters no matter what, that we'll always be perfect together. I feel this pull in my chest, this want to believe her and curl up between them like when I was little and everything felt safe. But then I look over at Connie sitting on her bed watching this whole scene, her face still swollen and scarred, and I remember what they want to do to me. I force myself to think the word manipulation over and over in my head like a shield against the warm, fuzzy feeling Mom's trying to create. They can love us and still hurt us, I remind myself. Those things aren't opposites in their minds. After breakfast, I lock myself in the bathroom and stand in front of the mirror practicing what I need to say. I start quiet, barely a whisper, forcing the words out. I do not consent. My voice shakes on the word consent like my mouth doesn't want to form it. I try again, louder this time, watching my reflection. I do not consent to any surgery. The words feel foreign and formal. Not like something a 15-year-old would say. But that's what I found in my research, so that's what I practice. I try different tones, testing which one sounds most firm. I do not consent, calm and flat like I'm stating a fact. I do not consent. Loud enough that I worry someone might hear through the door. I do not consent. Quiet but steady like I mean every word. I must practice for 20 minutes, saying it over and over until the words stop making my throat tight. When I finally open the bathroom door, Connie's standing in the hallway. She can't talk much around her wired jaw, but she nods at me. This small movement that says she approves, that I'm doing the right thing. The words feel like some kind of spell I'm learning to cast. Like if I say them enough times, they'll have actual power when I need them to. Over the next few days, I check the mail every single time I hear the mailman's truck. I watch out the window until he drives away. Then I'm at the mailbox before Mom can get there first. I'm scared my letter to Audrey bounced back, that the address was wrong or she moved and Mom will find it and know what I did. Each day that passes without it showing up feels like maybe it's safe. Maybe it actually got to Audrey, but I have no way to know for sure. The not knowing eats at me in this constant low-level way, like I'm waiting for bad news that might never come. But at least there's a chance now. A possibility that someone outside this house knows what's happening to us. On Thursday, we have to take Connie to her physical therapy appointment at the clinic. The therapist is this woman in her 30s with kind eyes who works with Connie on jaw exercises and facial movements. She starts asking questions while she's helping Connie, casual stuff about how we're doing at home and if we're getting enough rest. Mom jumps in immediately, answering before either of us can speak, talking about how supportive the family is and how we're all helping Connie heal together. The therapist nods and smiles but keeps directing questions at us, asking Connie if she's feeling okay emotionally, and asking me how I'm handling the changes. Mom keeps intercepting, spinning everything to sound normal and loving and like we're this perfect family unit dealing with trauma together. I catch the therapist's eye for just a second, and I see something there. This flash of recognition like she knows something's off. But Mom's right there the whole time, never leaving us alone for even a minute, and I watch the therapist's face shift into professional neutrality. She can't do anything with our parents hovering and monitoring every word. I want to scream at her that we need help, that this isn't normal, but my voice won't work with Mom staring at me. It's this special kind of frustration, having an adult right there who notices something's wrong but can't actually help us. The morning of the consultation with Dr. Yoon, I barely sleep at all. I'm running on pure adrenaline and fear by the time we get in the car. During the drive, I force myself to pay attention to everything, memorizing the route like I might need to know it later. I count the turns, noting which streets have businesses and which are just houses. I watch for bus stops and payphones, anything that might be useful if I needed to run. At Dr. Yoon's office, I scan the waiting room immediately, looking for exits and bathrooms and anywhere I could go if things went bad. The receptionist sits behind a desk filing her nails, looking bored and normal, and I wonder if she has any idea what kind of appointments happen here. Mom checks us in and we sit in hard plastic chairs and I keep my hands folded in my lap so nobody can see them shaking. A nurse calls us back after maybe 10 minutes and leads us to a consultation room with a big desk and chairs. Dr. Yoon comes in a few minutes later carrying a folder and he shakes everyone's hands and sits down across from us. He's probably 50 with gray hair and glasses, professional looking in a white coat. Mom and Dad launch into their whole prepared speech about twin symmetry and psychological bonds, talking over each other in their rush to explain. Dad pulls out all of Connie's surgical records and spreads them on the desk, showing Dr. Yoon the before and after photos of her injuries. Mom talks about how connected we've always been, how we've never been apart, how my distress at looking different from Connie now is causing me depression and anxiety. They make it sound so reasonable, like they're just concerned parents trying to help their daughter's mental health. They talk about our psychological bond and how important it is for twins to maintain their connection. Dr. Yoon listens carefully and takes notes, his face completely neutral and professional. He asks questions about Connie's recovery and looks at all the medical records. I can't tell what he's thinking at all, if he believes them or if he sees through it. My heart's pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. Finally, Dr. Yoon closes the folder and turns to look directly at me. He asks what I want, his voice calm and even. The room goes quiet, and I feel Mom and Dad both staring at me, waiting for me to say my rehearsed lines about wanting to share Connie's experience. I take a breath and force myself to speak clearly, even though my voice wants to shake. I say exactly what I practiced in the bathroom mirror. I do not consent to any surgery. I am 15 years old, and I am being coerced by my parents to have procedures I don't want. The words come out steady and firm, and I watch Mom's face turn white and then red. The silence that follows feels like it lasts forever. Dr. Yoon nods slowly and closes the folder in front of him. He says he cannot and will not perform any procedures without my clear consent, that medical ethics and state law require patient agreement, especially for minors in non-emergency situations. His voice is firm when he says this, looking at my parents instead of me. He suggests we meet with a family therapist and a social worker before any surgical decisions are made. Mom starts arguing immediately, saying I'm just confused and scared, that I don't understand what's best for my mental health. But Dr. Yoon doesn't budge, repeating that he won't operate without my consent, and that's final. I feel this huge rush of relief crash through me, but it's mixed with pure terror about what's going to happen when we get home. In the car on the way back, Mom and Dad don't say anything at first. They just sit in this cold silence that feels worse than yelling. The quiet stretches on and on until we pull into our driveway. Then the second we're inside the house, they explode. Mom starts shouting about how I betrayed Connie, how I abandoned our twin bond, how selfish I'm being. Dad says I'm making Connie feel worse about her injuries by refusing to share them with her, that I'm choosing to make her feel like a monster. The guilt hits me like something physical, this weight crushing down on my chest. But I look over at Connie standing in the hallway and she's shaking her head no, telling me without words that I did the right thing. Her eyes are saying don't listen to them, and I hold on to that even as Mom keeps yelling. That night, after they finally stop and leave us alone in our room, I pull out all my printed transcripts of the recordings I've made. I've been keeping them hidden in my pillowcase, but now I need better spots, places they won't think to look. I take the first copy and slide it inside a random book on my shelf, an old textbook they'll never open. I tape the second copy under my desk drawer, flat against the wood where you can't see it unless you pull the drawer all the way out. The third copy goes into the lining of my winter coat hanging in the closet, tucked into a small tear in the fabric. I'm methodical and calm about it, moving past the fear into something that feels more like determined survival. Each hidden copy feels like insurance against being silenced, proof that exists even if they take my phone or lock me up again. The next evening, I have maybe 15 minutes before they take my phone for the night, so I check my email fast while pretending to do homework. There's a message from an account I don't recognize, just a random string of letters and numbers. I open it and my heart starts pounding when I see it's from Audrey. The message is short and says she got my letter and she believes me and she can drive down this weekend. At the bottom it says delete this email in all caps. I delete it from my inbox and then go to trash and delete it again, making sure it's completely gone. Then I just lie there in bed staring at the ceiling while Connie sleeps next to me, and for the first time in weeks I feel like maybe we actually have a chance. Like maybe someone's coming to help us. 2 days later, we're sitting at breakfast and Dad puts down his coffee mug and announces they've found another surgeon who can see us next week. He says the doctor runs a private clinic out of state and accepts cash payment only. Mom smiles and adds that he's very discreet, an understanding of unique family situations, and the way she says it makes my skin crawl. My stomach drops because I realize they're shopping around for someone unethical enough to do this without my consent, someone who won't ask too many questions if the money's right. They're running out of options with legitimate doctors, so now they're looking for the kind of person who operates in the shadows. We're running out of time, and I can feel the walls closing in again just when I thought maybe we had breathing room. At Connie's next hospital follow-up a few days later, we're in the exam room and Mom's talking to the nurse about medication schedules. Eloise appears in the doorway and asks if she can check in on how we're doing. Mom waves her in and keeps talking to the nurse, not really paying attention. Eloise walks over to where I'm sitting and asks me some routine questions about how I'm handling Connie's recovery. And while she's talking, she slips a folded paper into my hand. Her fingers press it into my palm, and then she moves away like nothing happened. I tuck it into my sock immediately, feeling the paper crinkle against my ankle. Later, when I'm in the bathroom at home, I pull it out and unfold it carefully. It's a safety plan worksheet with questions about safe adults I can contact, possible escape routes from my house, emergency numbers to call. There are sections for listing people who might help, and places I could go if I needed to leave quickly. I fill it out sitting on the closed toilet lid, writing tiny so I can fit everything in. My answers paint this picture of just how trapped we are, how few options we have, how the locks on our door mean we can't even get out of our room at night. When I'm done, I fold it back up and hide it inside my pillowcase with the flip phone. That night, I wait until I hear Mom and Dad's bedroom door close and their TV turn on. Then I grab the flip phone and lock myself in the bathroom with the shower running to cover any sound. I dial the calling card number Audrey included in her email, then punch in her number. She answers on the second ring and her voice is quiet. We talk fast and quiet, establishing a code word in case I need help immediately. If I text her the word matching from any number, she'll call 911 and come straight here no matter what. She tells me she's already talked to a lawyer friend about custody options and emergency placements, that she's been researching what it would take to get us out. I flush the toilet to cover my voice when I tell her about the out-of-state surgeon and the cash payment. She says she's taking this seriously and she's ready to act when we need her. When I hang up, I feel steadier, like there's actually a plan forming instead of just desperate hope. The next morning at breakfast, Dad tells me to hand over my phone. He says my attitude lately means I've lost phone privileges until I can be more cooperative. I give it to him without arguing because I'd already moved everything important off it and hidden the old flip phone where they won't find it. I keep it in my pillowcase at night and move it to my sock during the day. Watching Dad take my phone and thinking he's won something feels like a small victory, because they don't know about every backup plan I've built. That afternoon, Connie's pain spikes badly, and she's crying because her jaw hurts so much even with the medication. Mom rushes in and gives her extra pain pills and sits with her, stroking her hair. Then she looks at me and starts in about how I'm making everything worse by refusing the surgery. She says I owe Connie my face, that sharing this would help Connie heal emotionally from the trauma. She says twins are supposed to share everything, and by refusing, I'm abandoning Connie when she needs me most. The guilt crashes over me in these huge waves, and I feel it pulling me under, making me want to give in just to stop feeling so terrible. But then something else cuts through it. This sharp anger that feels cleaner than the guilt. Consent isn't something you can owe someone, not even your twin sister. Mom's manipulation is so clear to me now, the way she's weaponizing Connie's pain to control me. I look at Connie and she's shaking her head slightly, telling me not to listen, and I hold on to that instead of the guilt. At the next clinic visit a few days later, I wait until Mom's distracted talking to the receptionist about scheduling. Then I walk up to a nurse and ask about volunteer opportunities, using our code words carefully. She doesn't react much but nods and tells me to follow her. She leads me to a stairwell away from the main waiting area, and Eloise is already there waiting. I tell her everything in a rush, my voice shaking but getting it all out. The new out-of-state surgeon, the cash-only payment, how Mom and Dad are escalating and getting desperate. I tell her about the bedroom locks and the phone confiscation, and how they're watching us constantly now. Eloise listens without interrupting and takes notes on a small pad, asking specific questions about dates and times. She asks if I feel safe going home today, and I say yes because I don't know what else to say, but we both know it's not really true. When I'm done, she tells me she has enough to file a report and that she's taking this seriously. Eloise explains the CPS reporting process to me in clear terms that don't sugarcoat anything. She's mandated to report what I've told her, and an investigator will be assigned to our case. They'll interview everyone separately, including me and Connie and our parents. But she's honest that it's not instant, that the system moves slowly, and there are no guarantees about outcomes. She says my parents might get warnings before any real action is taken, that family preservation is usually the goal. It's hard to hear, but at least I know what to expect now instead of hoping for some dramatic rescue that might not come. She gives me her direct number again and tells me to call if anything changes, or if I feel unsafe. I memorize the number and thank her, then head back to the waiting room before Mom notices I've been gone too long. Over the next few days, Mom and Dad notice I seem calmer, and it makes them suspicious instead of relieved. They start checking my pockets before and after every bathroom trip, patting me down like I'm trying to smuggle something. They time how long I'm in there with the door closed. I hear them listening at the door when I'm supposed to be sleeping. So I adapt and get better at hiding things, acting more natural around them, keeping my face blank and cooperative. I move the flip phone constantly so they won't find it in the same spot twice. I practice looking defeated and tired so they think they're winning. The performance is completely exhausting, but I'm getting better at it, learning to split myself into the version they see and the version that's actually planning our escape. Late one night, the flip phone buzzes with a text from a number I don't recognize. It's Audrey using a new burner phone. She says she's in town and booked a motel room, asking when Connie's next appointment is. We coordinate through quick messages that I delete immediately after reading. She'll be in the clinic lobby tomorrow afternoon during Connie's physical therapy session. I tell Connie in whispers after I'm sure Mom and Dad are asleep, and I watch relief wash over her face even though we both know this could go very wrong. That if Mom and Dad catch us trying to leave with Audrey, it might be the last chance we get. The next morning, I wake up to Mom standing in our doorway with her arms crossed. She says the out-of-state consultation got moved up and we're leaving in 2 days, that she already packed a bag for me with everything I'll need. My stomach drops because I can see the timeline collapsing right in front of me. Whatever institutional help might be coming won't arrive fast enough now. Mom watches my face and I force myself to look calm, even though inside I'm screaming. She leaves and I check under my pillow for the flip phone, making sure it's still there and charged. Connie catches my eye from her bed and I can see she knows what this means too. We're out of time for slow processes and careful documentation. Everything has to happen today at her appointment, or it won't happen at all. At the clinic that afternoon, I wait until Mom's focused on Connie's check and paperwork. Then I walk up to the nurse's station and ask about volunteer opportunities. The nurse's eyes flicker with recognition, and she nods, disappearing down the hallway. Within 2 minutes, Eloise appears and gestures for me to follow her to a quiet corner. I tell her about the out-of-state trip in 2 days, how it's a cash-only clinic, how Mom already packed my bag. Eloise's expression stays professional, but I see something shift behind her eyes. She tells me to wait right here and walks away quickly. I stand there counting my heartbeats and watching Mom across the waiting room. 5 minutes later, Eloise comes back with a man in a gray suit carrying a leather folder. He introduces himself as James Strickland from CPS and asks if I'm willing to talk to him privately. I nod and follow them both down a hallway to a small office with a desk and 3 chairs. James sits across from me and pulls out a notepad. He explains that Eloise filed a report based on our previous conversation, and he's been assigned to investigate. He asks if I have any evidence to support what I told Eloise. I pull out my phone with shaking hands and show him everything. The audio recordings of Mom and Dad planning how to manipulate doctors. The photos of Connie's medical files spread across our kitchen table. The screenshots of text messages about finding surgeons who won't ask too many questions. The pictures of the lock on our bedroom door that only opens from outside. James listens to each recording with headphones, his face completely neutral. He takes notes in neat handwriting and asks me to email him copies of everything. His questions are specific and detailed. When did the coercion start? What exact words did my parents use? Have they made any direct threats? Do I feel physically safe at home right now? I answer everything as honestly as I can, my voice somehow staying steady even though my hands won't stop shaking. He asks about the out-of-state clinic and I tell him everything I know, which isn't much except that Mom said they accept cash and are very discreet. James writes it all down with this focused intensity that makes me feel like maybe someone's finally taking this seriously, like maybe this isn't just another adult who's going to tell me I'm overreacting. James closes his notepad and explains what happens next. He needs to interview Connie separately to get her statement. Then he has to speak with my parents to hear their side. He's gathered enough for an emergency investigation, but he needs what he calls corroborating statements from multiple sources. He asks more questions about our living situation, and I tell him about the surveillance, how they check my phone every night, how they time my bathroom trips, how we're locked in our bedroom. I describe the surgery plans in detail, explaining how they want to replicate each of Connie's injuries on my face. He asks if I've ever consented to any of this, and I say no. Never. Not once. James writes everything down in his careful handwriting, and I watch the pages fill up with our story, with proof that this is really happening. When he asks if there's anything else I should tell him, I mention Audrey and how she's willing to take us in if we need somewhere safe to go. He writes down her contact information and tells me that's very helpful to know. The interviews are taking way longer than a normal appointment should, and I can hear Mom's voice getting louder in the waiting room. She's demanding to know what's taking so long, asking why we need so much time for a routine follow-up. A nurse tries to calm her down, but Mom's not having it. Through the door, I hear her say this is ridiculous, that she's Connie's mother and she has a right to know what's happening. James glances at the door but doesn't seem worried. He thanks me for my time and asks me to wait in the office while he interviews Connie. I sit there alone for a few minutes, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. Finally, James comes back with Eloise and they lead me out to the waiting area. Mom immediately stands up and starts asking what took so long, why they kept me away from her for over an hour. The clinic receptionist is watching nervously, and I see a security guard standing near the desk. Eloise quietly suggests I stay near the security area, while James talks to Connie and I do exactly what she says. James takes Connie into the same office and closes the door. I can't hear what's happening, but I can see Mom pacing back and forth, her face getting redder. Dad shows up 20 minutes into the interview, having left work early when Mom called him. They're both standing near the office door now, their body language tense and angry. Inside that room, Connie can barely talk around her wired jaw, but she's got a notepad and pen. Later, James tells me what she wrote in shaky letters that took her forever to form. They won't let us be different. That's all she managed to write at first, her hand cramping from the effort. But then James asked her specific questions, and she wrote yes or no answers. Do you want this surgery for yourself? Number. Do you want your sister to have surgery? Number. Are you afraid of your parents? Yes. James takes photos of her face from multiple angles, documenting every scar and the way her jaw sits wrong. He asks to see our bedroom, and Connie draws him a map showing the lock on the outside. She writes down that we're not allowed to have different interests, or wear different clothes, or be apart from each other. James gets copies of all her medical records from the clinic, the full documentation of every surgery she's had since the accident. When they finally come out of the office, Connie's crying, but there's something like relief in her eyes too, like she's finally been able to tell someone the truth without Mom standing right there controlling the narrative. The drive home is completely silent except for Mom and Dad's tense questions. What did we tell the social worker? Why did it take so long? What were they asking about? I give vague answers about routine follow-up questions and Connie's recovery progress. Dad's hands are tight on the steering wheel, and Mom keeps turning around to stare at us from the front seat. I wait until they're both focused on the road, Dad navigating a tricky merge and Mom looking at her phone. Then I pull the flip phone out of my sock under the cover of my jacket. My hands are freezing cold but completely steady as I type out one word to Audrey's number. Matching. I hit send and watch the message go through. Then I power off the phone and slip it back into my sock before either of them notice. My heart's hammering, but I keep my face blank and tired looking, like I'm just exhausted from a long appointment. Whatever happens next, at least we tried everything we could. At least someone knows and someone's coming. We've barely been home for an hour when there's a knock at the front door. Dad answers it and I hear him say something confused. Then 2 police officers are standing in our entryway asking to come in. Mom rushes over demanding to know what this is about. The officers say they're doing a welfare check based on a report filed with CPS. Dad's face goes red and he starts insisting everything's fine, that this is a huge misunderstanding, that someone must have misinterpreted a private family medical decision. Mom's talking over him about how they're just trying to help their daughters maintain their special twin bond. The officers ask to speak with me and Connie separately, and Mom says absolutely not, we're minors, and she has a right to be present. Then there's another knock and Eloise and James arrive. James has his CPS credentials out and he's very calm and professional, as he explains that he needs to conduct interviews as part of an emergency investigation. Mom and Dad are furious now, their voices rising, but the police officers are standing right there so they can't do much except demand to call their lawyer. James says that's their right, but the interviews are happening either way. I catch Connie's eye across the room and we're both shaking, but we're not backing down. Not now. Not when help is finally here. James asks everyone to sit down in the living room. He's got his folder open with all his notes and documentation. He starts laying out everything he's learned today. The coerced surgery plans where I've explicitly refused consent. The out-of-state cash clinic they found specifically to avoid ethical oversight. The recordings where they discuss manipulating doctors and presenting false narratives. The bedroom lock and surveillance and isolation. Mom interrupts saying this is just cosmetic surgery for mental health purposes, that twins need to look alike for their psychological well-being, that she's read studies about it. Dad adds that they're our parents so they can make medical decisions for us, that we're too young to understand what's best for our mental health. But James cuts through all of it. He points out my explicit refusal of consent on record. He explains the difference between necessary medical care and elective cosmetic procedures. He talks about the coercion patterns and the fact that they were actively seeking providers who would bypass proper protocols and informed consent requirements. The evidence is right there in the recordings, in their own words. Mom starts crying and Dad's threatening to sue CPS and everyone in this room. The police officers stay quiet but alert, watching everything. James remains completely calm and methodical, just presenting fact after fact from his investigation. By the time it gets dark outside, James makes a phone call, then another one. He comes back and says he's authorized an emergency kinship placement with our cousin Audrey. Mom's crying harder now, saying we can't take her babies, that we're destroying their family. Dad's yelling about lawyers and rights and how this is government overreach. But James has his paperwork, and the police are still there. And within 30 minutes, Audrey's car pulls up outside. She comes to the door, and I've never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. James explains that we need to pack essentials, that we can come back for more belongings later with supervision. I grab our important documents from Dad's file cabinet, birth certificates and social security cards and medical records. I get Connie's medications from the bathroom, all her pain pills and antibiotics. We throw clothes into bags while Mom follows us around crying and begging us not to do this. Dad's on the phone with a lawyer, his voice sharp and angry. The police officers escort us out to Audrey's car with our bags. I take one last look at the house where we grew up, and I feel this weird mix of relief so intense I can barely breathe, and grief for the parents we thought we had, the family we thought we were. Connie's crying silently next to me as we drive away, but she reaches over and squeezes my hand 3 times. I squeeze back 4 times and we don't look back. The next morning, I wake up in Audrey's motel room, disoriented for a second before I remember where we are. Connie's still asleep on the other bed, her face slack and peaceful in a way I haven't seen in weeks. My phone rings and it's James. He says he contacted Dr. Yoon yesterday to inform him about the investigation. Dr. Yoon then reached out to the out-of-state clinic to warn them about our case and the coercion involved. The clinic canceled our appointment immediately. Apparently, they're now under investigation themselves for other ethical violations, other families where they performed procedures without proper consent protocols. Mom and Dad's entire plan is completely dismantled. There's no surgery happening, no trip out of state, no doctor willing to touch this case now that it's flagged with CPS. I thank James and hang up. Then I just sit there on the edge of the bed feeling tension I didn't even know I was holding, finally start to uncoil from my shoulders and chest. We're not safe forever, I know that. There's still court hearings and legal processes and who knows what Mom and Dad will do next. But right now, in this moment, we're away from that house and nobody's carving up my face and that's enough. I look over at Connie sleeping and I let myself feel the relief, even though I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Over the next week, we pack up our stuff from the motel and move into Audrey's apartment in the city. It's a small 1-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of an old building with creaky stairs and thin walls. Audrey gives us her bedroom and sets herself up on the couch with blankets and a pillow. The apartment smells like coffee and old books, and it's cramped with 3 people instead of 1, but nobody's measuring our faces or locking doors from the outside. James calls to say there's a hearing scheduled in 5 weeks to figure out long-term placement. Audrey takes time off from her job at the library to help us get settled, showing us where everything is and making space in her closet for our clothes. Connie and I share the double bed, and the first night there, I wake up at 3 in the morning and just lie still, listening to Connie breathe next to me and realizing I can actually breathe too without someone watching. The second day at Audrey's apartment, we meet with a legal aid attorney named Pia Stanford, who's been assigned to represent us in the custody stuff. She's maybe 30 with short dark hair and glasses, and she talks to us like we're actual people instead of kids who don't understand anything. She spreads out papers on Audrey's kitchen table and explains what's going to happen at the hearing, what rights we have, what the judge will want to know. We spend 3 hours that first meeting going over everything that happened, and Pia takes notes on her laptop while we talk. She asks specific questions about the surgery plans and the recordings and the bedroom lock, writing down exact dates and details. When Connie tries to apologize for talking slow because of her wired jaw, Pia just waits patiently and says they have all the time we need. At the end, she looks at both of us and says she's going to fight for us to stay with Audrey, that what our parents planned was wrong and the court needs to protect us. I feel something loosen in my chest because this is the first adult with actual legal power who's completely on our side. That same week, Connie starts therapy with someone who works with trauma cases. The office is in a medical building downtown, and the waiting room has old magazines and a fish tank. I sit there during her first appointment, watching the fish swim in circles and checking my phone every few minutes. Connie's in there for almost an hour, and when she comes out, her eyes are red, but her shoulders look less tight than they've been in weeks. The therapist is a woman named Dr. Foster, who asks me to come in for a minute at the end. She explains that she's going to work with Connie on trauma from the accident and the surgery plans, but also on identity separate from being a twin. She says she wants to see me too, but separately. Different appointment times, because we need to be treated as individuals with our own needs, instead of as one unit that has to match. It's such a simple thing, but it hits me hard because nobody's ever approached us that way before. On Thursday, Mom and Dad get their one supervised phone call for the week, and James sets it up through his office with him listening on the line. They're so calm and reasonable that it's weird. Nothing like the people who locked us in our room and planned to have my face carved up. Dad's voice is steady when he says they were just trying to protect the twin bond, that they didn't realize we felt trapped or scared. Mom cries and says she loves us, that everything she did was because she wanted us to be close forever. I feel the old guilt starting to creep up my throat, that familiar feeling that maybe we're the ones who messed everything up. But then Connie reaches over and squeezes my hand 3 times, and I remember that love doesn't justify planning to surgically hurt your kid without their consent. The call ends after 15 minutes and Audrey makes us hot chocolate and doesn't ask what they said. The next week, the school district does an assessment to figure out where we are after being homeschooled for 4 months. We sit in an office with a counselor who has us do some tests and asks questions about what subjects we liked and what we want to study. When she asks about elective classes, I say, I want to try art, something I've never been allowed to do because Mom said it might make my hands develop differently than Connie's. Connie says she wants drama class and her voice is quiet but clear even through the wired jaw. The counselor just writes it down like it's completely normal for twins to have different interests, like we're not asking for something impossible. It's such a small thing, but it feels huge. This idea that nobody's going to force us to take identical schedules or do the same activities. We can just be two different people who happen to look similar. One Saturday afternoon, I'm standing at Audrey's bathroom sink with a box of pink hair dye we picked up at the drugstore on the corner. My hands shake a little as I separate out a small section of hair near my face, maybe an inch wide. It's not dramatic or anything, just one streak. But it's mine and it's different, and I'm choosing it on purpose. I follow the instructions on the box, mixing the dye and applying it carefully, and the chemical smell fills the small bathroom. Connie watches from the doorway, leaning against the frame, and when I look at her in the mirror, she's smiling. Not the sad smile from before the accident, not the scared smile from the hospital, but a real smile that reaches her eyes. I rinse out the dye and dry the streak, and it's this bright pink against my brown hair, visible and obvious, and completely different from Connie's appearance. She reaches out and touches it gently, and I realize she's actually happy to see me look different from her for the first time in our lives. The day before the hearing, Pia comes over to Audrey's apartment, and we sit at the kitchen table going over what's probably going to happen. She's honest about the fact that this won't be a clean break, that family court tries to keep parents involved when possible. She explains the likely outcomes: temporary custody orders, required counseling for mom and dad, supervised visits, ongoing CPS monitoring. She shows us example court orders and explains what each section means, what protections we can ask for. I appreciate that she's not promising us we'll never have to see our parents again, even though part of me wants someone to guarantee that. Connie writes questions on a notepad because talking is still hard, and Pia answers each one carefully. By the end of the meeting, I feel prepared instead of just scared, like I know what to expect, even if it's not perfect. The hearing happens on a cold morning 5 weeks after we left home. The courthouse is this big stone building downtown with metal detectors at the entrance and security guards everywhere. We meet Pia in the lobby, and she walks us through what's going to happen, who's going to testify, what the judge will ask. The courtroom is smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights. Mom and Dad are already there with their lawyer, and Mom starts crying when she sees us, reaching out like she wants to hug us. The bailiff makes everyone sit down, and the judge comes in, an older woman with gray hair and glasses who looks tired. James testifies first about his investigation and what he found, showing the judge copies of the recordings and photos. Eloise talks about her concerns from the hospital visits. Dr. Yoon explains why he refused to do the surgery, and how our parents were looking for less ethical providers. Pia presents our statements that we wrote together, reading parts out loud. The judge asks us questions directly, and I answer as clearly as I can, explaining that we don't want surgery and we don't feel safe going back home. Connie writes her answers, and the judge reads them carefully. Mom and Dad's lawyer tries to make it sound like they were just concerned parents making medical decisions, but the judge cuts him off and says coercing a minor into unwanted surgery isn't a medical decision. After 2 hours of testimony, the judge makes her ruling. No elective procedures can be done on either of us without our explicit written consent. Kinship placement with Audrey continues. Mom and Dad have to complete family therapy before any unsupervised contact. There will be supervised visits twice a month with a social worker present. CPS will monitor the case for at least a year. It's not everything I hoped for, but it's enough. And I feel this careful relief mixed with sadness about how completely our family broke apart. That evening back at Audrey's apartment, Connie falls asleep on the couch, exhausted from the long day at court. I sit at the kitchen table with a notebook and start making lists, because that's what helps me feel in control. School supply needs for when we start next week. Therapy appointment times for both of us. A meal plan where we each pick different dinners on purpose just because we can. Audrey's at work and the apartment is quiet except for Connie's soft breathing and the hum of the refrigerator. I write down everything we need to do and everything we want to try. I realize I'm planning a future, instead of just surviving today. We're not okay yet and maybe won't be for a long time, but we're safe and we're separate people now, and that feels like the beginning of something real. That's my take, but come on. I know you've got opinions. Drop them in the comments. I'm ready for it. I read through everything, so tell me what you'd do differently. Let's see which comment starts the biggest debate.